him kick Weidman and his leg snap like that and became rubber like that, for some reason it cued me into the anatomical structure of the human leg, and I saw it more as built for that ambulation, for that running, than anything else. And I realized that a lot of the techniques that are employed in martial arts with kicking and stuff are not really what the human leg is most built for. The human leg is most built for movement in walking, and especially for running. And I started, looking into running and looking into like I've run here and there all through my life, but now I've really started to open the doors into experiencing that running as something that fits within my artistic vision very well. That our bodies are made for it, that we are by evolution endurance hunters, and basically we're made for running, and we're made to not wear the heavy clunky shoes. I'm in the coulee today, and in particular I'm looking for rattlesnake dens, and so I wore some protection on my feet. But at this point, this amount of protection on my feet is what I have on my boot is feels so constricting to me after a year of trying to go minimalist as much as possible. And so this is what my barefoot running is about. It's about running the human way, rather than wearing casts on my feet and potentially causing damage, causing the wrong buildup of the wrong muscles, and overkill in some muscles, and underdevelopment of the foot, and all of these things that Freddie doesn't seem to get, because he's too stuck on the fact that there's dirt on the ground that I'm going to be stepping on. It's, to me, that concern is retarded. We are human beings. I love being out here and being in the nature and in the dirt, and this is my environment. This is what I'm born for. I'm not born to be inside and sterile. So anyway, my well-rounded bunch of stuff that I was starting to engage in for my physical training included the running, included the swimming, another basic human skill, included the strength training, the fitness training, which I mostly borrow what Freddie's doing, included the flexibility training, which again I mostly borrow from what Freddie's doing. And then it comes to the combatives, and I have to ask myself, okay, what am I going to use, what am I going to train in my combatives? And so really I want to be a martial artist who's proficient at all different ranges and such. And I look at martial arts as something that many species do, perhaps every mammal species, certainly some bird species, and maybe some others, that all of these animals engage in playful and contact sparring. Playful yet contact sparring, where they're not aiming to injure each other, but they're aiming to train themselves to be able to fight physically, should that happen. But the training itself is more playful, it's more fun. And one of the really basic types of that kind of playful sparring training that all these animals employ is grappling. Grappling is at the core. And in fact, when I asked Blackfoot elders, what kind of physical, martial arts were here before colonization and such, they tell me, well, there's a lot of running for the buffalo hunting, and then we trained all the weapons, spears and bows and arrows and knives and these kind of things, and then there was a lot of wrestling, and so when I started thinking about, okay, where are the gaps, where are the biggest gaps in my training, because I have been trained And I'm not saying I'm good or anything, but I've been trained as a striker all my life, and I haven't really had much experience with grappling and wrestling. And one of the things that I started recognizing as I realized that that was such a big gap, and then realizing how many people out there in the past decade have had to come to terms with that gap. Many martial artists, as the UFC has grown and Jiu-jitsu has come into popularity and been proven to be so effective, many martial artists who didn't practice that ground range have had to come to terms with it. And I started seeing in the issue of not having developed that range that there are some social taboos at play that steered me away from wrestling, because I used to wrestle with my brother and grapple on the ground and stuff just as normal human child play, that sparring that I'm talking about. Why doesn't that continue into adulthood? I think there are some cultural things going on that should be explored, and that speak to why we have the face of the UFC that we have, but also speak to why you have people like Freddie who are so extremely paranoid of the homoerotic aspects of two men engaged in grappling. Anyway, instead of running from that, because I carried that same thing. Like, I was in high school where there was wrestling, and it was the closest thing to the martial arts I was doing, and if I was going to go into any sport in high school, it would have made sense to go into wrestling, but I chose not to go into wrestling or any other sport. But I saw wrestling as, guys in tights being really closer and more intimate than I would want to be with guys. But now looking at the artistic vision that I have, without the wrestling and the ground grappling, the jiu-jitsu, I am an incomplete martial artist. I'm a hugely incomplete martial artist and a hugely incomplete human being in my inability to basically defend myself from those ranges. And so rather than run away from that, I decided to embrace it and start looking at grappling. And I had to take little baby steps to get there, right? I had to start with, well, I'm going to buy some grappling dummies and I'll grapple with them because I don't really want to be that intimate with people. And then I thought, well, I'll recruit, some of the women that I know to come and grapple, because that'll be good for them and it'll be good for me, because I can learn the techniques and they can learn them, and it's very important, I think, for women to learn that, ground grappling. I think it's very important for human beings in general, but in terms of is it actually going to be called for and needed, the more likelihood is it's more likely that a woman is going to have to employ it at some point in her life than I am. I've gone a long time without getting in a physical altercation. Any case, so I brought my sisters-in-laws in, and then it was suggested to me, why don't I apply to become a Gracie Garage, because at that point I was using the Gracie's combatives curriculum. I'm still using that to develop my fundamental, my base in ground grappling, to get my basics down, so I have a foundation to build on. So I've been using the Gracie combatives, and it was suggested to me by somebody else who's involved in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, well, why don't you apply to for your facility at your house to be listed as a Gracie Garage. That way you might be able to draw attract more training partners. And that made sense to me. And I realized, you know, that was the next step I had to take, and I can't be avoiding training with men just because I got the same kind of weird cultural hang-ups that I believe are very North American mainstream. I got these cultural hang-ups about that kind of physical intimacy with men. So I went ahead and listed my place as a Gracie Garage. It was accepted, and within a week a training partner contacted me, and now I'm training with him and I'm enjoying it. And I've broken through those barriers that this society had set for me, and I'm able to continue developing myself now as a martial artist without having to be a fighter, without having to do any of that, and include the ground grappling as training as an important part of it. So, you know, that's why I began training the Jiu-jitsu. Why did I start loading it up on the FMK YouTube channel? Well, because my whole purpose for being involved in FMK was to be doing my own, you know, to be exploring and developing myself as my own artist and showing my art. You know, part of the joy of being involved with FMK for me was being able to share what I'm doing with other people and to have feedback and that kind of a thing through the YouTube channel. Why not just my channel? Well, my channel doesn't have very many viewers. I'd rather put it out there somewhere where there's 27,000 people that can potentially look at it and give me some feedback than I would just putting it on my own channel where there's a limited number of viewers. Even now, what I've learned to do, while I have absolutely put everything on my own channel, what I've learned to do is then copy the link from my channel and go to other relevant places on the internet and put my links there so that I can, you know, draw mutual interest parties to check out my videos. So that's why I started putting them on the FMK channel. Yes, I knew that this would really test Freddie, because I know he is adamantly against ground grappling because of his hang-ups with homoeroticism, and because he associates it with combat sports. But me, I can clearly distinguish. I'm not so unintelligent that I can't distinguish between ground grappling training, jiu-jitsu, and combat sports. The two are mutually exclusive. Yeah, people who are fighting in combat sports need to learn that range. They need to learn those techniques, but they're not the same thing. They're not synonymous with one another. And so I thought I'll put these videos up on FMK because that's the truth. The truth is that they're not synonymous. The truth is that I'm not a combat sports fighter, that I'm not showing that. I'm still doing the different thing. I'm still doing the thing that ultimately is the important thing, which is developing myself as an artist and doing it differently than is exampled in the combat sports. So Freddie is unable to see that ultimately, and you know, maybe that is where things started to get shaky. I mean, I'm sure that was part of it. That was a big part of it. Freddie was being asked why is Ryan putting these up there? And you know, for a while he defended me, but ultimately in the end he had to confess that it bothered him the whole time, and that's okay. That's Freddie. That's him. I expected him to be better than that, but he's not, and that's what just has to be accepted. And that, perhaps for me, was the revelation that I needed to start looking more carefully at who Freddie is, because what he had sold me on was not the truth. It's not the truth. He doesn't want to develop a community of artists. It's something else that's going on in FMK, and I think that's what I'm interested in exploring here on my own channel with some of these videos.